Hi, thanks for downloading the Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take on different topics related to visual storytelling, what it's like being a visual storyteller, lifestyle stuff, also, how to make stuff, how we think about making stuff, and how we think about planning to make stuff. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jersey Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, I am Rob Stenzinger. I am a visual storyteller of various sorts, game designer, UX designer. How you doing,
How you
Jersey?
doing, Rob?
Well, doing pretty well. It's flu and cold season. Might have a little bit of thing as far as my tone adjusted. My instrument is feeling the effects of the weather. So
Mm.
just
What's the kind of communicable illness of the various seasons that you find incapacitates you the most in terms of your work?
let's see.
Because we both have lines of work that allow us to even potentially work in bed, right? So, like, it's got to be
Yeah,
something really
I mean,
intense for me to be knocked out like that much.
it depends on the commitment that I have going on because I am very thankful that I can do work from home kinds of things, and really sometimes it's an enhancement to like what tools and stuff I have available. Other times it's a trade off as far as you can't really facilitate in person things, right? So the hard part is like really getting in front of people. If that's like next on my list and cold comes along, then that's rough because then you got rescheduling and all sorts of hassles. But yeah, that's the biggest challenge, I would say. How about you?
I'm usually okay with just about anything except for anything that makes me dizzy. So like,
Mm.
even like if I get like a stomach flu and I got a really sour stomach and or if I got like a really bad throat thing going on, I can usually keep on working. But if it's dizziness, then I'm just no good to anybody. So that's the one symptom that I just can't get by with.
That that's a pretty darn
That's a
fundamental
big
one.
one. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
pretty big one. Being able to sit up straight, being able to focus your eyes. But I have found that not to paint this as any kind of heroism, but yeah, like even when you got like a bad cold, one of the I'm highlighting this as a privilege of my line of work is that even when I've got a bad cold, I can still clock in hours if I really need to. I'm not I'm not crab fishing, you know. Like Brandon Dayton talked about on his YouTube videos. He's talking about like why art is often considered like a frivolous activity, and he was like being very generous and understanding, saying like, well, it's a line of work where it's not physically that dangerous. It's not like coal mining, it's not like crab fishing. There's a reason that those jobs are considered to be very high paying positions, right?
Certainly. Totally. Yeah. Having like sort of desk and office kinds of tasks in general, that's certainly yeah, an interesting privilege. But different dangers, right? You have sort of sedentary lifestyle challenges that are important to
Yeah,
manage, and
yeah.
just yeah, other habits that like aren't quite what humans are necessarily evolved to do physically, right? So you gotta watch out for that. I did a little bit of reflection on that during our creative challenge last month, Art Sound Off. What was was episode on, or the prompt I attempted to address was fitness. So that's probably in the title.
That was a fun one. That one
Aye.
was so. I highly recommend. Man, if you want to hear Rob make himself incredibly uncomfortable, listen to his Polytechnicast where he talks about his relationship with fitness.
Oh, it's a great parlor trick. Getting really uncomfortable on microphone. It's great.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. It's like it was this dodging and parrying between qualifying your statements and offering disclaimers, but then saying, "No, I'm not going to offer disclaimers. I'm going to lean into this." Whoa, I feel really uncomfortable. Watch me qualify and disclaim again until finally he's like a robot malfunctioning in a corner at one point. It's really great. It was a great food for thought though, Rob. It was fun to listen to you argue with yourself.
Okay.
Not just in the cute, humorous way, but also in an interesting way of like listening to how somebody processes ideas.
I'm glad it was useful. Right on. Yeah. So, but that definitely related to our chat here before we jump into our topic. So, Speaking
All
of
right,
that,
yes. Speaking of which, so I was thinking about mini comics again for a couple of reasons. And actually, the Art Sound Off, challenge is related to this as well. In that Owen Jolens did a post during the Art Sound Off challenge where he talked about making mini comics, and he referred to something that he attributed this expression to me that make lots of mini comics. How did he say it? Ambitiously was a key to leveling up your skills. He attributed that phrase to me. I don't remember saying it exactly that way, but I really like it. But I was thinking about that, but also this Saturday I'm going to be at the Tiny Expo exhibition at the Ann Arbor District Library. I know we have some local viewers and listeners to this show. So Saturday, December 9th, 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. I'm going to be tabling. Actually, this could be the first time I think this year that I've tabled at any show. And I'm going to have my new mini comics there, the Friendly Game mini comics, as well as all my other stuff that I've been making over the years. But to get ready for the show, I was putting together a bunch of mini comics. And as I was sitting there stapling them, I was like, I really do love mini comics so much. And then the light bulb went off, and I said, yeah, how about we do that for a topic? How about we revisit this idea of why they are so wonderful, both in terms of the flexibility of the format and the self-contained nature of leveling up and learning that happens when you confine yourself to a tiny commitment, right?
oh yeah, this is mini comics are just, they're a fun sort of sanity check and like a creative endeavor that it can be deeply satisfying and useful. Where, like you mentioned, you're going to this Tiny Expo event and assembling mini comics, and that is, let's see, like, I found them so useful to be able to go to events and have fresh work, right? Or even like do a little bit of tweaking on something that isn't a big complicated project. And I don't know, mini comics are fantastic for that, and lots of other things. So I'm looking for, and I'm looking at creating a mini comic that's paired with this game project I'm working on. So super timely. Excited to talk.
Super
about
timely. And what you're talking about, comic packed in with a game, Shadowing Tronics is in the chat and just said, hoping you'll mention the pack-in promo mini comics in toys and some food products. I enjoy and have a review article series about them. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, this is what we're talking about, right? This is, here's an old Star Years figure that I have in my office. And back then, cool. This is sealed. I can't even open this. Oh my goodness. Mint in box, OOP. But yeah, you can see behind him, the toys used to come with a little mini comic to give you some context for the exciting adventures that you might be able to role play with the figures. But yes, I am also a big fan of that too. That idea of a little comic that comes along with an I don't want to say unrelated, a different media, right? Whether it's a toy, whether it's a game, whether it's even if it is a food item, just like something that comes. I don't know. I love reading them. Mm-hmm. Yep. But even beyond that, there's this whole thing that I love about the flexibility of the format itself, and I'd like to dig into that first, if you don't mind, Rob.
I would love that. Looking forward to it.
All right,
ready to go on the ground? 10,000 feet up.
Yes,
we're ready.
We are ready now. Mike Emirates is in the chat. He says, "Hello all. Who else is working on a mini comic while watching a stream about mini comics?" It's a mini comics all the way down. I hope so. That'd be really cool, because I do love them. So when I talk about flexibility of format, so even though my very first comic that I ever made and printed was like an offset printed distributed comic that I self-published, shortly thereafter I got into this is actually a mini comic I made in 1995. This is one of my first ones.
I've never seen this.
No, I don't. I think I only have like 1 or 2 copies left. I have like the printer flats that I made for this years ago, but it's not that good. I toy around every once in a while with the idea of like reprinting these things in some kind of collection. Maybe in 2020, when this is 25 years old, I'm gonna do a 25th anniversary retrospective. Probably not, but yeah, it's you can hold it up to see. It's just like a photocopied thing, right? And actually on the back, and I used to like just put a little piece of tape here, a low tack tape, and I would write the person's or the address where it's going to, and this is where the postage would go, and I would actually mail these to people. Did all my comics selling via mail back then.
Wow, that's really functional. That's awesome. I hadn't seen that approach. Hadn't even
I think
considered
zines
that.
did this, didn't they? I
Yeah.
must have gotten the idea from zines. I don't think. Here's another thing, like as an aside, as I get older, whenever I think I have a clever idea, my next thought is I can't have been the first person to think of this. I must have seen this someplace else. But I don't know. I don't know if I came up with that or if I got that from zines. But anyway, yes. So like people would get this in the mail, and it's just I would just draw it this size, piece of letter sized paper, cut up the pages, put them on the flats, and print them up at the copy shop. Slightly different colored paper for the cover. So this is like when I think of mini comics, I think of this as like the platonic ideal, right? This is like as basic vanilla ice cream mini comic as it gets. And what's so compelling about this to me is how quickly you can get into it, right? Like I made this with just like some cheap typing paper, a pencil. I didn't even ink it. I just did the pencils like really dark. And
Oh wow.
and
And
then
what photocopying provided the
yeah,
rest of the
yeah,
the
photocopy rendered it into the pure black
darkness?
and white, right? Back then, what I did, instead of having to erase pencils, I would do my loose pencils on a single sheet of paper and then light box it with another piece of paper to do the final pencils. So that's why there's no like sketch marks on there or anything.
Wow.
Um,
Nice. Curious, what
anyway,
kind of
yeah.
light box? Did you use a window?
No, no. I actually had a homemade light box. I went to a hardware store, got a big Tupperware, like laundry bin kind of thing, cut a hole in it, put a piece of glass in there, and put a fluorescent light underneath.
Oh, that's a cool one. I hadn't heard of that kind before.
I think I read about it in some. I can't remember where I found that idea. But at the time, I was going to Comic Cons as a teenager and like trying to gather as much information as I could about how to make comics more effectively. And I got hooked up with this group of guys who all made mini comics. That's what got me started. But yeah, so this is what I think about when I think about like your basic, entry level mini comic. But then like this is what they call digest size, 8.5 by 11 folded in half. But then like the format I'm totally hooked on right now is this one, which is like quarter size of 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, right? So here's your typing paper. It's 1/4 of the size. There's just something that's so lovely about how pocketable it is, yet it still allows you to do like interesting layouts and art if you really want to. You don't have to break out a magnifying glass to read it. And then there's this is one of Megan Brennan's comics. This is one called Comics the Cat. And it's this person arguing with their cat, but it's also a metaphor for arguing with our art form. And and these are the most itty bitty ones that, and you can find a template for this at webcomics.com where it's one sheet of paper, right?
Oh,
That you
yeah.
cut a hole in and fold it up, and boom, you've got a comic. And even more immediate, Oh, by the way, Megan-Brennan.com. Highly, highly recommend her comics. I love them. I love them so much.
She was a guest on the show a while back.
That's right, she was. That's right,
Yeah.
she was. Yeah, here's 2 pages from the comic, if you can read them,
Yeah.
where she's arguing with her cat. Comics, that's not necessary, and behind
Reboot.
comics, the cat is his gritty reboot. Yeah, and it's just ink on a single color sheet of paper, but it's still, it's a fun read. And Megan also makes, these really thin comics. This is one, or
Oh.
one about the cat from Sailor Moon. But then you can do, and I know we've talked about this, but we can do even more, like like what I did with the Boulder and Fleet comic, where I do the quarter size mini comic where it's like just going to the copy shop to do the interiors, but then I get fancy art paper for the cover. I do letterpress printing or screen printing to add this sort of extra hand touch. A person made this, reminding them of that, making it seem. Well, okay, to put it this way, I was having a conversation with somebody not long ago where I was talking about kids I ran a class a while back where the kids produced comic stories that got collected in an anthology, and someone said, "Oh, wouldn't you want it to be art instead of a comic?" And I was like, "What?" And like after a little bit of talking and investigating, rather than getting all angry and screaming in their face, because we shouldn't, I found out that this person thinks of art as a single handmade item, right? It's not mass produced. Totally get that, right? Comic books, when you think of them, it's a mass produced, mass market item. Whereas when you add this like personal touch onto it, like you touch this, you can actually feel the raised letters from the letterpress print, right? It's like, oh, a person actually pulled a lever to make that thing, right? It makes it a little bit more of an intimate transaction of sorts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's just there's a little more. I don't know what to call. I suppose there are qualities that you can look at, like a mini comic that has this rough and readiness, easily pocketable, or super functional, where it even can be mailed via its own self as a vehicle, right? But yet that it seems like those are like kind of functional jobs, and maybe they're not mass market, but they kind of have this the feel of not that art special artifactness of like a unique piece of art. But then there's got to be this. You're adding a little bit more. But it's almost like it's not like you're just adding features to it or adding complexity. There's a little bit of a craft to what you're adding to give a signal of the specialness of this, compared to like, well, oh, it has foil pages, right? Or it's got a hologram on the cover. That's kind of,
Right. You remember the '90s too.
I do.
Yeah.
Definitely special, definitely like different, not you don't run into that on every single comic, but yet somehow the one set of features sends a signal of a craft and an artist put into this, probably, by hand. The other is saying like fancy features, big budgets and stuff.
Right, right, yeah, and putting a hologram on the cover, and believe me, as a fan of laser blazers, like a big fan of laser blazers, like I find them like so beautiful and charming, and I wish I could make laser blazer stickers of some of my stuff. There's something very. It doesn't feel like a person. Well, rather, I should say that a person did have something to do with making it, but something seems very clinical or sanitized about that. Whereas when you have something that was pulled off of an old printing press, you know that there was very little machinery. The only machinery involved, it doesn't have its own motivation, right? A person has to pull a lever in order to, yeah.
But it's a fun thing to explore, but somehow there is a similarity there,
Sure.
of the extra features and whatnot. And at some point, like, what if you had a printed circuit board mill at home, or you have a 3D printer, or you have, like, we're not that many years from like crazy pants things getting added to mini comics.
That's true. That's true. Now that I think about it, oh my gosh, Becky Hillburn does
The
woodcut,
yeah,
the laser woodcut things for her comic, right? She has a whole bunch of products that she displays at shows, and it's her art, and it looks like her art. I mean, it's clearly made by her, right? But yes, yes. So there are some assumptions built into what I'm saying here, right? Like that. Like,
I'm not just trying to be counter argument guy, but yeah, it's weird where if you have somehow we have a vocabulary, and it's
Yeah.
interesting to point out, like, oh, this is something that is attainable by an individual, and this is only attainable by a large organization, right?
yeah.
And over time, that can shift. So
That's very true. That's very true. Well, and I think in evaluating what to take on, I think, for me at least, something to keep in mind is, how do I reinforce the idea that this is something that came from my hands, right? How do I keep that present, even if I do start using a 3D printer, even if I do start using, a CNC router or a laser engraving machine, right? But then there's another level to this before we dive into, like, in the second half. I'm hoping we can talk about some of the benefits that you get artistically from engaging with, or that we've derived artistically from this, playing with this format. But there's another layer where the format itself feels very flexible and almost invites you to invent. And I'll explain what I mean. Actually, I have an example right here.
Okay. So flexible and invites you to invent.
So here is, what is this? He-Man and She-Ra, A Complete Guide to the Classic Animated Adventures. You know I love this topic. You know I love the characters. This is something I'm very enthusiastic about. This book weighs like 12 pounds. You know,
It's not a
This is
backpack book.
it's not a backpack book, and it's not
No.
something that I'm just going to casually be reading in bed. The trade-off of having such an exhaustive tome of information is I can't casually enjoy it, right? The moment you start getting into traditional book printing and producing and publishing, you start to run into sort of like interesting limitations in terms of size, right? Winsor McKay's comics, the Little Nemo comics, which were originally produced, you know, like that big, huge. You collect those in a book at their actual original printed size, and suddenly you've got this monster. And can you casually enjoy reading that? Well, maybe. It's not as easy as a paperback, right? So where am I going with this? If you want to do interesting art things with your comic, playing with formats, playing with different cool designs and packaging and stuff, mini comics make it a lot more approachable. Here's a really great example that Anne picked up at the Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. I'll try to get it up on the screen. This is called Cosmonaut, and the comic. Let's see if I can do this while still talking to the mic. It's got like this visor you're looking through, and you're looking at this space scene here. Well, rather, it's like a man on a planet. And you slide out the comic. Let me try to slide it out. Also, another visor on the other side, and you slide out the comic. Okay. So we got this comic, and
Yeah.
I'll walk through the story. Spaceship flying through space. Which way do I want to read it? This way. And suddenly the engines explode or break, and the pilot's all angry. Ship comes crashing down to the ground, and we see the ship coming down, and we see there's an inhabitant on this planet, right? And suddenly the ship is landed, and the inhabitant is coming toward it. Pilot gets out. Inhabitant's got a club. They face off. Inhabitant comes running at the guy. Guy shoots the club out of his hand with laser zap. He's triumphant, and the savage inhabitant is subdued, and he walks away. And we see, what? Did I read it in the wrong order? I did read it in the wrong order. Oh, I'm explaining it all wrong. Okay, sorry. So what this does is, here, I'll undo it. The comic is a giant loop, and the story never ends. So what the story is, and I think I was reading it in the wrong direction. This pilot crash lands on this planet, gets into a fight with this caveman. Caveman wins the fight, and then the caveman gets in the rocket, goes into outer space, gets engine trouble, crash lands on a planet where caveman and he get into a fight. Caveman kills him, then that caveman takes his ship, and it just goes on and on and on forever, right? Doing this. Doing this as a large book would be... Oh, and it's screen printed. It's screen printed on top of this. Plus, the inside of the loop is just like outer space. See that? All these constellations.
Yeah, like
and everything.
constellation maps and stars on the inside.
And then all folds up. Didn't get it to all fold up again. Oh, for goodness sake!
Oh, what a trick! Because now you look at. I mean, how many interesting problems to solve in this? In that little special work.
And this is when Owen talked about making mini comics ambitiously. This is what I thought of, right? It's like, yes, you're solving a lot of problems with this, and you're making this really. And I mean, the guys who sold it to us, it wasn't cheap. I mean, understandably so. I mean, you think about how much work went into making this thing, both in terms of design, in terms of printing, in terms of drawing and writing. But this is it's by EERO, and it's called Cosmonaut, KNOT. If you can, I'll see if I can link to it in the show notes.
Okay,
but then
that's
it slips
really...
back into. Isn't it neat?
Yeah, what awesome work that is.
And then here's another one. This one's by one of my favorite cartoonists. This is Pranas Najikaitis, and this is called Laffy Meal, and it comes in this bag, like a fast food bag, which has a screen printed logo on it. Have you seen these before, Rob?
No. This is
Reach
cool.
into the bag. Reach in the bag, and there's a ketchup packet. And the ketchup packet is a mini comic about some characters going through fast food drive-through type deal. And
Okay.
then also in the bag, there's a whole bunch of mini comics in here. Oh, there's some French fries. What's the French fries? The French fries is another screen printed mini comic related to the other story in there, but a completely different size format, right? Here's the ketchup packet one more time, right? Ketchup packet and the fries. Different size comics telling different aspects of the story. And then there's a drink that comes with it
That
with
is
another story.
so cool and cute and brilliant.
And then there's your burger, right? And then the burger has another story in another size format. And then finally there's your toy. And there's a toy that comes with the Laffy meal. And it's another story about a kid in the overall story. And then when you purchase it, it all comes together packaged in this Laffy meal bag. And this is only one of the amazing different projects that Pranas has done with mini comics, where it's just like, and again, I'm going to show this. I want to pull out one of these mini comics and hold it up to the camera one more time, because you look at it, technically, there's not that much really going on. It's just a cardstock cover, screen printed. Okay, screen printed or not, either way, it's cardstock cover with a single color cover, and then a short story inside. But then the flexibility of the format of how can I make different comics of different sizes all work together, have some kind of overall interconnected narrative, and how can I package it up in some kind of interesting way? Well, right? If you did this with books like that He-Man book, you're looking at an 80-pound colossus that nobody will be able to actually, well, you're defying somebody to enjoy reading it, you know?
Well, you have to
Whereas,
wait. You have to save up for the forklift edition, right?
right, yeah. Whereas this is like totally manageable and playful and fun.
Awesome.
So the name of the creator, one more time, somebody's asking in the chat, is Pranas Najakaitis, and then Cosmonaut was by Eero, Eero. It says on here, let's see, Uncivilized Lab. And again, I'll link to them in the show notes. But yeah, these are just two of the kind of cool things. If you go to shows like SPX, CXC, TCAF, you find a lot of stuff like this. And this is so. Not only do I love how accessible and easy to jump into and manageable mini comics are, they also allow you to be very experimental. It's almost like it's daring you to experiment with it. Whereas I don't think if you did that with like a traditionally printed book, the frictions become a lot more frictionless. You know.
Mm-hmm. Right, because there are certain affordances that a large scale comic, provides you as far as what's, printing in mass, high quality offset work that has vibrant colors and whatnot, lots of colors, right? And because you have the whole CMYK color space to work with, right? Where you may have less of a color space to work with to get like the nice crisp printing. You're dealing with different techniques on the mini comic side of things, and just you're making trade-offs to gain those strengths. It's not that doing mass printing it doesn't have its incredibly useful benefits, but like you get locked in to a process too.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it. Mini comics kind of unbind you from a lot of constraints. And I see that unbinding as an invitation to explore and experiment. But then again, I find these little itty-bitty things just as delightful and just as charming, because in these cases, it's all about the idea, right? Let me get my idea across.
Well, it's okay. So these are some awesome examples, very powerful, right? What say we look more at the why and some of the benefits of making mini comics?
Yeah. So like in a minute and 30 seconds, we're going to talk about what benefits we've derived artistically in terms of our growth and in terms of just developing evidence and building skill through engaging with these kinds of little tiny projects. But before we do that, we have to thank some people who make this show possible. And those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/leanintoart is It's the way for you to give us a monthly upvote, saying like, yes, I believe in you and I believe in the stuff that you do. I enjoy it and I want to keep it going. And we want to take this opportunity to thank 5 people who have been doing just that. First up, Jamie Gamble at Jamie Gamble on Twitter. Thank you, Jamie, for supporting the show and believing in us. Owen Jolens, who we mentioned a little while ago, at Comic Colorist. Go track him down on Twitter and go check out his art sound off entries. They were really great. Mark Falk at Radimir on Twitter. Thank you, Mark, for supporting us. India Swift, Old Swifty on Twitter. Thank you, India. And finally, Casey Snipes. And you can find Casey on Twitter at letter K, letter C, Snipes. And if you want to go to patreon.com/leanintoart, you can find all the shows that we produce, as well as the extra leans, the shows that we record in between the main shows, where Rob and I usually just like riff on a topic and land on some kind of interesting discussion once a month, and it's for patrons only. And then that post becomes an open mic post where you can take the conversation wherever you want to, in a safe place where only fellow leaners hang out. So once again, that's patreon.com/leanintoart, and thanks to everybody who has been supporting us there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. It means a lot to us.
Patreon, what is it? The new pledge system notwithstanding, we're waiting to find out how they respond to that backlash.
Yep. Clearly, the tools we choose to connect with who we're trying to serve, sometimes they change. We've evolved platforms over the years at Lean Into Art. We may evolve again. I don't know. But for right now, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we need to dig into this and see how it's panning out, right? It's big topic.
Big topic. All right.
We already have one for today.
Thanks, Rob. That's a good transition to talk about what we got to talk about next. We got to go 10,000 feet up, where we talk about the topic more in abstract terms, talking about the why aspects of the topic instead of the what and the how. So, what do you think? What are some of the benefits you found from engaging with this format?
I just thought of a couple of benefits that just occurred to me are, well, it's connecting with an audience, and sometimes having a fresh something to even carry in your pocket, depending on where you're going, right? And you've used the metaphor, and you've like on the Lean Into Art cast, and also I recall you mentioning this on Thunder Punch Daily, your Art Journal podcast, or one of your Art Journal podcasts, because anyway, your other one you have to support Jersey on Patreon to get, and that one is called Fabulous Secrets. Anyway, Thunder Punch Daily, you mentioned this idea. I'm burying the lead, super buried. I have to dig. It's the idea of being at a cocktail party. You don't run around and hand out your business card, right? But like in the context of certain events, like it makes a lot of sense that just in your pocket, if you happen to have mini comics, or it's some incentive to say, hey, you're going to this big event. It'd be appropriate in the right conversations to have a mini comic and maybe do a swap or what have you as a networking tool. And that's one thing where, let's see. So not last year, but the year before when I went to A2CAF, I did an update of a story that I renamed it. So this used to be called No Remorse River Horse. When I did this originally as a 24-hour comic a few years back, and it was wordless, right? So it was wordless, and it didn't have, it had a weird title. So then it got renamed Toughest Hippo Goes to Bunnytown. And it was like not a huge creative process to do to pick up this work, and then I made it into essentially a poem where I added.
Yeah, the whole story is told in verse, and I love this.
Yeah, so then essentially I took what was wordless panels and added verse. So such as the toughest hippo leaves the hippo kingdom to walk the earth round. Eventually that walk led to Bunnytown, and so on, right? So that little layer, that not great amount of effort, was a nice like freshness that I could bring to an event. that's one example of the networking thing. The other one is, I don't know if I've shared this, but like I've made my new business card, which I just carry a couple with me, is a mini comic. Right. So boop, super tiny.
Oh
And
wow.
I carry it like I stuck it. I slip it right behind some note cards in my little note card thing I carry in my pocket. And what it is it's it's essentially a business card. That's it, in mini comic form, right? So if you fold it, I have a message that is repeated or reused, right? So it's got a couple of these windows because I'm trying to show like, hi, I think a lot about design and whatnot, and look at this, the in-depth nature to such a small object. What if we worked on something big together, right? That kind of thing is it's imbued in this and in the message, and it's a mini comic for
That's awesome.
that connecting with others. So
Yeah, because I think as I said on the Thunder Punch Daily is like I go to conventions and I get cards traded with me. People give me their business card, and there was this one in particular where you meet so many people at shows. I mean, if you go to the after parties and everything, you could potentially meet hundreds of people, right? If you're really working to get around the event, especially at big ones, right? Like at ALA or something.
Easily, yeah.
And I got back to the hotel room and I took all the cards out of my wallet, and there's this one had a beautiful image and then just like a person's name, and I think it was like an email address. And I was like, well, this tells me exactly nothing except that they can draw really well, if indeed that's what they drew. It was, and I didn't remember who they were, right? Because like there wasn't this moment of me connecting with anything that they were saying with this piece, this artifact that they handed me. So what you're describing is something, yes, this is thoughtfully crafted to begin a conversation, right? There's those holes cut in there, and I'm looking at them like, oh, wow, what's this? Oh, neat. I like how this works, and then it invites you to elaborate and explain and demonstrate your expertise so that you become a more memorable presence, right? Not to say that this is all Machiavellian, like manipulating people, but part of it is, but the other part of it,
and there's a healthy necessity to the social aspect of us as humans to connect and whatnot. Even if we have an aversion, if we've seen misuses of that, right? Someone trying to manipulate your lizard brain to buy booze or whatever, right? It's like whatever. Someone wants you to be particularly titillated or what have you. Like those techniques get overused, but the entire like discipline and benefits to choosing to engage in like, well, showing that you have this service to offer and making others aware of it. It's a worthwhile endeavor to try to find some comfort with that. Otherwise that's going to be a really tough road as far as the sustainability of your business.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So like a little tiny comic, like what you're describing, or even like something like Megan's with this Comics the Cat, just something that's really small and pocketable that gives a very brief but clear idea of who you are and what you do, right? So for now, what I've been doing as a stopgap, because I haven't had time to make a new comic in that way, I've just been taking like these floppy guys and then just printing with my letterpress in the back, like my contact information, right?
That's great. Multiple use.
Here's a cute comic. Yeah.
It's not locked in. It's flexible, right? That's a wondrous part of mini comics. I could have done that with a different mini comic as well, but I wanted to. I don't know. It was an interesting challenge and a little experiment. So
it's really neat. Yeah, the guys in the chat are impressed by it as well. Okay, so something Owen said that I want to underline, and Owen said it much better than I can, so I recommend you go check out his podcast, his Art Sound Off entry. But he talked about how in physical exercise and physical therapy, like to build muscle strength, you don't just target just this bicep. I'm just going to work just this bicep. Like some of the most effective strength training, as I understand it. I clearly don't.
I love this segment of the show. Please, we forgot to play the pump it up stinger or whatever, but keep going.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell everybody how to lift
also,
weights
we're
down.
talking fitness, so I'm getting worked up.
All right. Anyway, supposedly it's more effective to work multiple muscles at once. And sure enough, like when I stretch to go jogging or whatever, I have been looking into this, and like there's all these different stretches you can do that work like several different systems at once. Like this is going to do your glutes, your legs, and your upper arms because you're working your body as a system rather than as targeting individual things. And Owen was talking about how mini comics, you're doing something very similar in that you're using several skills all at once. You're leveling up several skills all at once instead of just targeting one. So if you're saying like, well, I got to get better at drawing, well, I'm going to practice figure drawing. I'm going to go to life drawing classes. Well, that's working like one thing, right? But when you're doing a comic, you're practicing your writing, you're practicing your design, you're practicing your rendering technique, you're practicing that drawing human form or whatever. You're practicing your 3-point perspective, 2-point perspective if that's in your story. You're practicing pre-press and production values. All those things are being engaged with in this very manageable way because you're only doing like an 8-page story. So Owen found this really lovely metaphor for something I've been saying for years in that it's something that is easy to engage with, but when you come out on the other side, you've practiced a lot of different things, and the next one you do presumably will be a little bit better from the experience of the last one, right?
Yeah, it's a deep practice. It's like it's a multi-skill practice. That's and one of the things, I don't know what to call it. There's got to be a name for a multi-skill practice that has like a completeness to it and also a sort of service or exchange to it, where like a mini comic becomes I would say a more shareable piece of work that others could benefit from than essentially a single drawing for the most part, especially if it's sort of the informal style, like informal drawing versus not all mini comics are informal though, of course. This is anyway.
Thanks, Rob.
Exactly. Poo-poo. Surprise! I've unmasked the villain. It's me.
No, I get what you're saying though. Let me see if I can build upon it and also risk sounding like I'm dismissing entire groups of people.
Thanks.
Just teasing. I'm trying to channel Kate, but I'm not good at it. I was listening to the Art and Science Punks podcast, and she's so good at just giving you the business, but in this really sweet, gentle way. It's so fun to listen to. But I once saw somebody was passing around this comic strip of a person, like they hold up a drawing and they're like, and it says new thing, and like the audience is like, and then he's like, he takes popular thing, other popular thing, and smushes it together like that, and everybody cheers, and then the artist just looks sad because that's all people want is just mashups of what they already know. I get the pain, but I also empathize with the audience because it's hard to just buy into new things all the time. We're getting hit with so many signals. This is all to say, this is all to build this point of, if I see a beautiful drawing, I can say beautiful drawing. If there's nothing else to hook me into it, then all I have is this moment of momentary awe at a piece of demonstration of exquisite skill, right? But if you make it into a story, and this is what you're talking about the Art and Science Punks podcast, by the way, you talk about this idea of like how narratives help us to remember things, how narratives help us like sign on and empathize with things. Suddenly, I feel like it's, I want to hear what you think about this. I feel like it's ticking the same switches that we get when somebody takes popular thing and other popular thing and smushes them together. Because if you've written something that people can relate to, then you've given them an on-ramp to get excited about it, even if they've never heard of it before, right? Because why do those two things that they like smushed together make them happy? Because those things have already flipped those switches of their empathy and emotional identification.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because you have this thing that is like, well, more frames, more like, it's not just the single expression of an idea that maybe you intuitively get everything that was trying to be communicated in that. But let's say you didn't. If you have a sequence of ideas presented to you, now they become a little system that can teach you what it meant, because it's a story. It's a thing after a thing after a thing. And I mean, even if it is challenging and juxtaposing just weird moments or vignettes or whatever, it's still, because of the sequence, there's this context and packaging and a wholeness to it compared to like a standalone illustration,
Hmm.
especially, yeah. I won't use my informal. Yeah.
No, but yeah, yeah. I think the word informal is appropriate a lot of times in mini comics. I mean, I consider my engagement with them is a very informal way, and this is where we can get to another aspect of like what I like about leveling up in terms of art is that yes, when I draw one of these mini comics, I am putting my all into it, but I still feel like I'm risk taking in that I can experiment with different ideas. I can test drive ideas, right? Um, Pickles and Taft started off. This is a mini comic that you can get at the Tiny Astronaut store, but also I'm going to have it at Tiny Expo. Um, it started off as just like it was an Inktober drawing. It literally was just. It started off as I drew a pig on a tortoise for an Inktober sketch one year, and I got a lot of feedback on the drawing. A lot of people who I respected gave me like enthusiastic responses. I was like, okay, I wonder if there's something there. Well, let's make it into a comic. Let's see how it does at shows. You know, I don't have to make a full graphic novel out of the idea. I can basically do like an episode, and it's a great way for me to experiment with my writing, experiment with my drawing, and experiment with different kinds of ideas. Um,
That sort of, I mean, that's another kind of leveling up. It's both in the execution of all the visual communication and whatnot, and the packaging and connecting with an audience, but as far as leveling up with your storytelling, finding what resonates that you enjoy creating. And
yeah,
so it's almost like how a band will try new material and maybe deprioritize stuff that isn't getting a big audience reaction, but then,
yeah.
you know,
Stand-up comics do something similar where they go on the road and they try out things in small clubs and then they put together their hour. It's like they tour for like a year and then they find their hour of material based on what they fool around with. And so that's when you say informal, that's what I think of is that I don't feel a lot of pressure to deliver something that is conceptually very polished. It can just be me screwing around idea wise and seeing what sticks.
and so I have an example of that where I created a comic that has like 4 chapters to it. Art Geek Zoo, The Way of Sound. It's still at artgeekzoo.com, but there's a character in there that was a sort of one of the antagonists, and it's this little guitar pedal called Max Ruckus Effects, and I had different thoughts and that I wanted to try. Where what if this character had more depth, and could they take on more in the story? And so I did a little side story with Max Ruckus Effects, right? A kind of exploration, and also a way to practice. Let's see, a different art style. So instead of being all digital with which is where I was with the main comic, I went with an analog production approach. So finding just like how much art style and the amount of shading and doing some light coloring as opposed to full color and all this stuff. So a lot of experiments that I just put into this little project, and it's so it's not just the art, but it can be finding a new job or voice or character or topic.
Right. Yeah. All of those things. The mini comics format is it's very adept, or it feels very optimized to be playful in that way with all those things. Like yes, like you were saying, like when I look at Pickles and Taft, which was drawn entirely in Clip Studio Paint, and it was my experiment to see like how close can I get to what it looks like when I draw on paper with Clip Studio Paint, right? Versus A Friendly Game, which was drawn inked directly off of the thumbnails, right? Which this was how I did as an Inktober challenge, right? So can I do a 24-page comic for Inktober one year? Sure, I did it. Now I can make a mini comic out of it. Playing with different tools and different flows and approaches, and even different like you when you showed your comic, it was a different aspect ratio, right?
Oh yeah,
Wide.
this is going wide format. It's I have an affection for the wide format because I even bound the now, which I don't think very many copies. Well, I don't have many copies anymore of the 4 chapters of Art Geek Zoo. I did that in a sort of a landscape layout, and honestly, just because I like it, I like that I I like how it feels to consume things that are the rectangle on its side. That's it. So
Interesting. I've done one mini comic that way, which is the fish don't have teeth story that again is on the Boulder and Fleet website. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I'm still fond of the portrait mode because of the 3 tiers, the implied 3 tiers that you get out of it. And I think that something I run into when I do wider panel or wider pages is doesn't feel as easy to stack 3. You get 2 stacks, right? You get 2 rows out of it.
that's a good point. That's a really like if you have a comfort or discomfort with either, like that's a good I don't know, a good either if you want to challenge yourself, pick the one you're less comfortable with, or not because
Well, no, yeah,
maybe that's not what you want to test.
right. Maybe that's not what you want to test, but that is another element, right? That part of the excitement about the format for me is running those little experiments. I wonder if I could do such and such, right? So the fish don't have teeth comic was like, hey, I wonder if I could. That was one that I drew for mini comic day, where you draw an entire mini comic in 8 hours. And so I sat down with a piece of paper and was like, and I had it like this, and then I had it like this. I'm like, let's see. I turned it sideways and started going. So yeah, I get excited about like finding out where the edges are on my skill set and pushing at them a little bit. And there's something that's very manageable about an 8-page mini comic because you can conceivably, even if you're only putting in like 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, you can crank one of them out over the course of, a few weeks. Even if you have very, very limited time, or you can do them in an evening if you want to put 8 hours into it,
That's a
I have
volume of work.
go ahead.
It's not the challenge of putting out a graphic novel, right? So there is the whole sometimes when you fall in love with a medium, you can have like you described, Jersey, with the mini comic, have your platonic ideal of that's what this a set of design constraints has become my assumption of what this medium is, and that can really. That could really lock you in if you're like, well, I got to tell a story that's 80 pages or 120 pages or what have you. And a mini comic is this way to just have little slices where you're almost doing let's see, the kind of story where a bunch of artists get together and they tell short stories, right? A
Anthology,
but just doing one little slice.
Yeah, that's another thing is that these things can be collected. And then something I've said before, but I think it bears repeating. One of the hardest things, we did an episode on pep talks last time, talking about those points when you hit low points, when you get stuck on something. And sometimes you can get stuck on the fact that it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere, or it doesn't feel like I'm doing enough, right? Maybe you're only getting to crank, you get to like whittle 20 minutes a day. And that sense of inertia can feel very elusive, right? Well, if you have like a stack of mini comics of different ones that you've made, suddenly you have evidence that you can create and ship a thing. By the way, I've been using that language in my classroom a lot. Teen students have a different relationship with the word ship and shipping.
Oh, rats.
So they kept getting stuck on that. They're like, why do you keep saying that? Like, why do you want us to ship? What are we shipping? I'm like, you're shipping comics. Like, I don't ship comics. Like, oh, okay. Finish and complete and deliver a comic. In other words, shipping, like the post office and UPS does. But
all right.
Yeah. Kids, right? No,
gotta get a new metaphor, I suppose.
but this can become maybe not like a cure-all, but it can become one more sort of salve to help keep you going. Is that, well, look, I've got 5 things that I've made. I've proven that I can do it. This isn't inability that's stopping me. This is something else, right?
So thinking of this kind of getting, what's a good way to shape a mini comic? And I'm wondering if picking the right topic or project or something. What are some things that you think of where it's like, oh, this is becoming an experiment? And I'm curious if this could be a question that we explore
For final thought?
As our final thought.
You're so good at this. Look at this, everybody. This is the picture of experience.
Hey.
or age and experience.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Quite true.
Sorry. All right, in about 2 minutes, we're going to conclude with that thought. Is like, how do you know, like, or what are some ways that we think about approaching this in an experimental way?
Oh, man. And how to get embarrassed by your podcast co-host. Our bonus topic.
All right, next episode, all holds are barred. No holds are barred. And you come at me, bro. Come at me in any vicious way you need to.
Man.
I asked for it. I totally did one of these. In the gentlest way possible.
I'm thinking.
I know. All right, we got to thank some more people who make this show possible. Those people happen to be us. We make stuff. We announced when we got here that we are visual storytellers. So let's talk about some of the stuff that we actually make to communicate visually. I said I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. That is to say, I make comics and I teach comics classes. And the comic that I hope you will check out today is Boulder and Fleet Adventures for Hire. What's it about? 2 best friends. They want to make a living as adventurers. They're not always that great at it, though, because while the bird is a very effective, like Fleet, she's a really clever and effective bird and very ambitious. She wants to be super successful. Well, she's partnered up with this very powerful bear. All right, sounds like it's a recipe for success. Oh, no, he doesn't like fighting. He doesn't like getting into adventures very much. He would much rather sit around and make friends and eat apples. So solving the kinds of problems that adventurers run into become a little bit more complicated. You can read it at boulderandfleet.com. It's also on Instagram, at boulderandfleet, on Twitter, at boulderandfleet. There's also a Patreon where I post some behind-the-scenes stuff, and there's a link in the sidebar to that, as well as where you can get the print editions of Boulder and Fleet. And right here, look, there's Boulder and Fleet, and Fish Don't Have Teeth, and Pickles and Taft. Yeah.
Oh, so, and that's where you also post your awesome, fabulous secrets art cast.
Oh, that's right.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic feature of supporting you on Patreon.
Oh, thanks. Rob, you make a game. Let me, I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can pull up the game, and then I will, well, you go ahead and talk about it, and then I'm going to,
all right, you got it. So I make a game called This Panda Needs You. And let's say you're thinking, I like a casual, pretty mellow experience to just sort of play around on my phone or tablet or even desktop, where it's just like I want to take a little calm break. Or maybe you have little ones in your life who are looking for a really a fun pattern matching kind of game to play. This Panda Needs You is really well suited to that, because what you have is this cute little panda who's there to minding their own business, walk along through this calm forest, and you encounter stacks of shapes, different shapes, in situations that different patterns. A cloud, every single time you encounter these things, comes along, knocks them down, and your job is to help the panda put them back together the way they're meant to be, right? And it's physics based, so it gets more challenging as you go up through the over 50 levels, when it's like it's a little more crowded and you got to kind of manage what are you going to stack first and where and how. And but even then, it's a pretty mellow game, and you can learn more about it at this-panda.com, and you can buy it in all sorts of different app stores. itch.io for the desktops, and then of course Google Play for phone and tablet, Android, and then the iTunes App Store for the iPhone and iPad.
this-panda.com. If you did purchase the game, a great thing you could do if you haven't done it already is giving it a star rating in the iTunes App Store. That helps more people find it. All right, but let's suppose that that's very nice. You guys make games and you make comics. Good for you, but we're really here to listen to the way you guys think about ideas. Fair enough. This is a product that we make, and there's more like it at leanintoart.com/workshops, where there are, finished video workshops, like discrete video workshops that you can download at a price of your choosing, even if that price is $0. I've got comics workshops in there that I've been teaching in my classrooms for years. Rob's got making video games from comics, storytellers UI tools showing how you understand user interface if you understand comics. Once again, leanintoart.com/workshops. If you are watching this video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show, or if you're listening to it in a podcatcher like iTunes, giving it a star rating on iTunes helps more people find the show as well. And we thank everybody who has been doing all of those things. It means a lot to us.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Final thought time.
So final thought, we're going to just noodle about the idea of like, well, where to start? What's a good mini comic experiment?
Good mini comic experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me ask for clarification real quick.
Okay.
Do you mean you've got an idea, and how do you know that that idea is experiment material, or how do you create an experiment to generate ideas?
Well, so do you start with mini comic? Is this form that, well, it's a container, I'm just going to put something in there and figure it out? Or do you start with, I got the thing that's really going to be well suited to mini comic? Or you know what? There's so many puzzles about this thing, this story. Hey, maybe I can find a way to put it in a mini comic format to get unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I know it's an experiment when I'm I wonder how much of this is self-knowledge from years of experience, but no, I do wonder about this, because like I can tell when I'm, Rob, you've known me a long time. You know that I get fired up about some things. I get really enthusiastic and my eyes get wide. I'm like, oh my God, I talk really fast, right? I get that way about my story ideas sometimes. And I know that excitement will wane the moment it becomes work. So how do I keep it from becoming work? Well, I make it a tiny thing. And then if I come out the other side of that with if the interest is still there, if I'm still fired up about the idea, then I know to keep investing in it. So, and also, I get excited about ideas, but then the moment I think about like having to build like the world logic and like what's the magic system I'm going to use in this, like how do physics work with this kind of magic, and what kind of terrain is going to be there, what kind of vehicles would you find in the world, and I go, oh my gosh, this turned into a research project now. Can I just tell a story? You know, that's what the experiments that mini comics provide me, is it allows me to dive in without having to do all of that extra development work, right? So Boulder and Fleet started that way. Boulder and Fleet started out with like, I just want to do these two friends. They both have different points of view. It'll be a fun experiment to try. And it was also like a structural experiment where it's like, I want to tell a story where they're based on people that I know, but I swap the points of view, but keep the original voices, right? That kind of thing, like that kind of experimentation in narrative. Okay, I can dive in and do that stuff, but I don't have to think too hard about like, why are there bug creatures and lizard creatures that are talking? I don't have to explain that because it's a mini comic. So when I'm excited about an idea, but I'm not excited about developing it, then I know it's a mini comic experiment. Does that make sense?
It does. So do you find that where, is it sort of okay, I'm excited about the idea, and then some critical process in your brain goes, but what if, why is the bear that strong, or how did that bear grow up to become that strong? And you're like, backstory. Oh no, world building. Is that how? Yeah. Where? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I get bummed out when I have to start thinking about backstory. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that I know this is probably like something that's a specific bias of my own, probably coming from my fascination with the Saturday morning cartoon style of storytelling, where you don't get backstory. You just dive in, and like, I'm fascinated by the idea of like, how can I get the reader to know the characters and understand where they're coming from with as little dialogue and as little visual material as possible. right? How can I very efficiently deliver the idea of character? I love that. So the idea of backstory seems like a lot of unnecessary spade work. It's like I don't want to be in the garden for an hour and a half, right? I want the carrots. Give them to me now. You know, I don't know if that was a good metaphor or not, but so
Well, no, it's a great metaphor, and I mean your point of how do I keep this? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but like, how do I keep an idea that I love from becoming drudgery, and the drudgery being maybe the long slog of a long story development, or the traps, potential traps of deep world building and backstory, because there's no room for it. Like, so it's the severe space constraint, I guess, of the medium that sets you free.
mhm.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I know that in 8 pages I have to hit certain beats really quick, right? Climax has to happen on page 6, right, or thereabouts in that general vicinity. Um, Page 1, I have to establish where the characters are, how they feel about one another, and start to get close to what their desire is in the story, right? Page 2, you better know what they want. Page 3, they start to interact with that and come up against some kind of hiccups. Page 4, 5 is where climax happens. And then page 6 is like, the solution to the problem. Page 7 is wrapping up.
Mm.
So, or page 7, 8, somewhere in the neighborhood. Like, I don't have it like nailed down like a perfect map like that, but like it's easy
It's
to
a
figure
flow,
out. Yeah.
right? I mean, each page and the panels on the page are containers for that flow. That, hopefully it's not a Mad Lib, so you don't know exactly what to fill out where, but you certainly it's not a big mystery. It's not like it's hundreds of pages or even dozens. There's only so many jobs and so many pages, to as far as hitting beats of like that, like an arc of like a common story progression.
Right. Shadowing Troy in the chat is saying, you save the backstory for when you've established your idea. He says, issue 3 of Captain Yuletide was when I finally revealed the origin of the powers and rules. Yeah, I mean, I did something very similar, Shadowing, with the origin of Jared, which was a single standalone story that I did after I finished the front graphic novel, right? Because, like, do we need to know where Jared, the abominable snowman, comes from? No. All we need to know is that he likes slushies. He's not that bad a guy. He's just mixed up with the wrong crowd. But when readers started asking that question over and over again, I was like, all right, I'll write a short story about it. And I had time to think about it because I was developing all that other stuff along the way. So, yeah, that's kind of like a sideline point on this, but like back to your original idea of also knowing when it's an experiment is also when I get excited about different sizes and formats, like when I see something like Megan Brennan's Comics the Cat and I go, I love that this contains a subtly complex yet apparently simple idea, and it happens very quickly enough to delight me and capture my attention, but then I put it down. It's like this snack sized kind of feeling of lovely and like I said, like subtle kind of comics complexity. And that excites me to say, well, can I do that? Can I put that together too? Can I make a story in this format that captures everything I love about comics in a way that gives somebody this briefest of like this YouTube size or like Vine size snippet of
What
storytelling
an interesting
happiness?
comparison. Yeah, because
Right?
that's a very interesting comparison to like essentially really brief, enjoyable, satisfying video clips. This is, if there is any comic form that is close to that, it's mini comics. And
Yeah, like the Batman dad or whatever.
yeah,
Remember that guy?
yeah.
Yeah, and like I remember that was the moment when I finally got Vine. Like it was like, oh, this is what it's for. Okay. I feel like that's what Megan Brennan's Comics the Cat is, right?
Wow, I thought that was a pretty darn useful exploration, Jersey. What do you
Cool.
think?
I feel like I've sang my love song to mini comics again. And yeah, I just hope more cartoonists will consider engaging with the forum. Because I like going to conventions and trading or purchasing, either way. I love meeting cartoonists through mini comics and finding out who I have an affinity for through the work that they do. So
So yeah, so as you said, snack sized, right? So
yeah,
if someone happens to have been producing their epic, right, and it's many chapters long, that's a lot like your coffee table book you pointed out of He-Man and She-Ra, where it's like, boom, here's this work.
yeah.
That's hard to get to know someone over, that much material. Whereas the little bit is perfect.
Yeah, that's another great point. That's another great point because I have people who like will come up and they'll give me like a 200-page graphic novel, like, "Oh, I look forward to hearing what you think." I'm like, "Ha! I look forward to finding the time to sit down and read this." Whereas if they give me something that's like this, like or even like this little guy here, like 12, 16 pages, I can get to know you pretty quickly through that. So, yeah.
So it's a great social media, right? It's a great experimental form of comics,
Hmm.
and it can be informal to incredibly artistic and expressive, and like mutate into Happy Meals.
So it really is a format that has it all. It has it all. That's amazing.
It does, because you can tell a longer story. You just have to collect a bunch of them.
Hmm. Yeah. Actually, yeah,
Definitely.
Pranas, who did the Laffy Meal, he has like a collection of monster stories that are in slipcases that are all die cut, hand cut, and screen printed. Ugh, that guy is a freaking genius. I love his work so much.
Wow.
Hopefully, he'll come to A2CAF again this year. So then maybe you'll get to meet him if you haven't already met him, Rob.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for downloading, watching, and listening. The show is recorded every week, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, streamed live on YouTube, and then collected later on, rather usually the next day at patreon.com/lean into art. And more social media links and things are going to be shared in a moment. But until next time, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
And this is where I say, okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to stop the stream. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.